I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we'll need a motion to go into work session. Be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors hereby enters into work session for the purpose of discussing the following: FY 2014-2015 budget presentation. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Would the substitute clerk call the roll?
Supervisor Creed?
Yeah.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Tubbs?
Aye.
Supervisor Gabriel?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye. And I think Ms. Perkins is on the way. I think she'll be a little late, but I understand she is coming.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out on a not so pleasant Monday, but at least it's not as bad as it could have been. I wanted to start from down here this evening just to share some of the highlights and share part of my budget message with you that we're presenting tonight. And then Carol is going to get up and share some of the more specific information, some of the details related to the numbers, and then I'll wrap up with some concluding remarks. One of the first things I wanted to do is just talk about some of the challenges that we've had to deal with over the last 5 years. As I was putting this budget together over the last couple of weeks, this is my 5th budget presentation to you guys, which seems hard to believe. The time has really flown by. But in the past 5 years, the board has dealt with a significant number of challenges, including funding new debt service requirements for the largest debt issue in our history to build and renovate schools. The Commonwealth during that time has continued to shift responsibilities for public education and other mandates. The decrease in school funding from the Commonwealth and higher retirement rate contributions for all employees have left us with difficult choices to continue to ensure quality education. In addition to all that, during the last 5 years, we've had a loss of federal stimulus funding for schools, as well as a rapid rise in inmates housed in our local and regional jails. Since fiscal year 2010, the economy has continued to show signs of weakness, and while many believe that the economy is improving locally, there are still lingering issues that we are having to deal with regard to growth in real and personal property values. Despite these challenges, the board has made great strides in improving the quality of life in our county. During the past 5 years, the county has constructed 2 new elementary schools, 2 new high schools, and we'll be completing the renovation of the former Auburn High School for use as Auburn Middle School by the end of 2014. The new courthouse will provide judicial and administrative space for our courts for many years in the future, and the renovation of the former courthouse for a new public safety facility and consolidated countywide 911 center will be completed by the end of this calendar year. New joint authorities with our 2 towns and Virginia Tech will address our public safety dispatch needs, and another joint venture will address our long-term water supply for county residents. A joint program with the 2 towns to also promote tourism in the county and the surrounding region is boosting visitation and tax revenues. In addition, we've aggressively pursued economic development opportunities, adding 3 new companies in the Falling Branch Corporate Park, with a 4th company planning to break ground for a new facility later this year. Most importantly, we have strengthened the county's financial position for the future and have designated funds for future capital needs for the schools in the county. This foresight on the board's part will reduce the amount of borrowing needed in future debt issues for facilities. During these past 5 years, the board has made many difficult decisions regarding funding shortfalls by increasing both real estate tax rates and personal property tax rates. From a real estate tax rate of 71 cents per $100 valuation in fiscal year 2010 to the current tax rate of 89 cents, the board has funded shortfalls in state support for schools, constitutional offices, and public safety functions. Even with a 25% increase in our real estate tax rate over the last 5 years, these needs have continued to grow as we find ourselves facing requests for dollars greater than our available revenues. Just in the fiscal year 2015 budget, as it was proposed to administration, county departments requested 9 additional positions and $3.6 million in additional funding, an amount that does not include increased compensation or benefits adjustments for our employees. In addition to these costs and these 9 new positions, the sheriff also asked that 9 dispatcher positions intended for transfer to the new 911 authority in January 2015, that those positions be retained in his office as additional deputy positions. In addition, the county schools requested $7.7 million in additional funding, primarily to address compensation and benefits costs for school employees. With total projected revenue growth for the county for fiscal year 15 of only $4 million, of which $2.5 million is already designated for schools, difficult decisions are required once again this year. For fiscal year 2014-2015, the total proposed budget for the county is $171.6 million, a $4 million or 2% increase from the current fiscal year. The proposed real estate tax rate for fiscal year 2014-15 is held steady at 89 cents, which represents no change from the current fiscal year. 2 cents of the 89-cent rate for the school capital construction fund is recommended to be continued, as is 1 cent of the tax rate for the county capital projects fund to be funding for fire and rescue equipment. No changes are also recommended to the county's personal property tax rates for 2015. The proposed budget provides $42.1 million in county funds for the school operating budget, which represents level funding from the current fiscal year. Of the $4 million in new revenues expected by the county, $2.5 million of these funds represent an increase in state and other funding to the schools, largely due to an adjustment in the county's composite index, which is the state's formula for providing school funding. While this recommended budget does not meet the school's funding request, and I certainly realize that, as we look back over the last 10 years, the county has increased local funding to the schools by over $11 million, which is equal to 15.7 cents on the real estate tax rate. This amount does not include the additional debt service that was issued for new school construction or other one-time funds provided to address capital or other school needs. We must continue to tell our state legislators how important it is that the Commonwealth adequately fund public education instead of shifting the state's responsibility to the local governments. In addition, we must continue to work cooperatively with the school board to find ways to provide cost-effective solutions for the provision of educational needs in our county. Currently, we're exploring opportunities regarding health insurance. As you're aware, we've had discussions with the schools about opportunities there, and we're also working to streamline our accounting software to allow more efficiency between the county and the school's financial offices. The primary focus of the fiscal year 2014-2015 budget is to address public safety mandates. Of the $1.9 million increase in required spending for the county, $800,000 is attributable to costs associated with the county's increasing inmate population at the Western Virginia Regional Jail. In addition to that, $325,000 more represents the county's portion after the transfer of dispatcher positions from the sheriff's office of the New River Valley Emergency Communications Regional Authority, which represents the 911 authority, which begins in January 2015. The remaining increases relate to VRS, group life, part-time employee health insurance, and workers' compensation increases, which total $483,000. Costs associated with fire and rescue insurance and VRS-related VRS-related increases related to volunteers of $91,000, and increased cost of utilities and lease space for county offices of $159,000. With only $1.5 million in new revenue available, the county staff, through diligent work of the budget process, was able to absorb $400,000 of these increased costs by reducing spending in other areas of the county budget. The proposed fiscal year 2014-2015 budget includes no increase in compensation for county employees. While the board supported funding in the current year budget to address compression issues within the county's pay plan, many employees have not seen increase in their compensation sufficient to keep up with inflation over the last 5 years. I am recommending as a part of this budget that the board consider approving funding for a one-time 1.5% to 2% bonus that would be paid to all employees in November 2014, but would be paid from any carryover funds that may be available at the end of this fiscal year, not included in this budget. If carryover funds are not sufficient to pay for this bonus, which is estimated at between $262,000 to $350,000, then it would not be paid. We have a very dedicated and caring group of county employees who provide services to our citizens every day to the best of their abilities. Whatever we can do to recognize their efforts would be appreciated. As you can tell, most of the funding again this year for the budget is related to public education and public safety. Those continue to be the main priorities in the budget, and those continue to take an increasing amount of the total budget as proposed. At this point, I'm going to recognize Carol Edmonds. Carol, Angie, and Mark are here tonight, and they have done the yeoman's work on putting the numbers together. I'd like for Carol to review the numbers with you, and then I'll offer a few closing remarks.
Okay, let me start with a few housekeeping details here. I have the paper copies of the presentation tonight, but it's also been loaded on your Dropbox. So if you go to the folder under Board of Supervisors that says Budget, and you want to find this on your Dropbox, it will be titled the FY15 Proposed Budget. Also, if you each should have a budget book up there, if you do not want a paper budget book, we intend to load the information in Dropbox from the budget tomorrow. If you don't want a paper book, you can just leave it there and get your information tomorrow. So it's up to you if you want to keep one or not.
I'm good. Thank you. Do you want to leave one?
Okay, as we get started here, let's talk a little bit about the process and where we are in it. If you recall, we had a public hearing open to hear needs on January the 13th. On January the 27th, Mark gave you an update on projected revenues and some of the requests that were known at that particular time. On February the 10th, the school board presented their request for funding. In between February 10th and now, Mark has been doing a tremendous job of reviewing all the revenue, trying to shake out all the nickels we can find from anywhere, challenging the base budget to see where potential savings may be and where dollars can be reallocated, and preparing the proposed budget and the current tax rate. Following the presentation tonight, there will need to be discussion of the proposed budget and tax rate. With March 17th is where you have scheduled to determine what you want to advertise for public hearing. If you do not advertise a tax rate, you will not need a tax rate increase. You will not need to have a public hearing on the tax rate. You will need to have a public hearing on the budget, whether you increase the tax rate or not. Then we are scheduled for April 14th to vote on both the tax rate and the budget. This is a very high-level overview of the really big, thick book that you have in front of you. And this is intended to be a snapshot of the entire picture of increases in all funds as well as the increases in revenue. As Craig mentioned, there's $4 million 63% of that is already earmarked for schools. The balance of that, or 1.5 million, is what's available to cover all other costs. I will say that we've had quite the spirited debate today on whether or not 0.2 million is actually new designated dollars or is really the new undesignated 1.5 million. And I'll spare you the details, but I will tell you the important takeaway from this is the 0.2 million represents $158,500 to be paid by the 911 authority as a partial lease payment on the cost of the public safety building. We've designated that into the debt service fund, which then frees up some other dollars in the general fund. And whether you consider that washing with shortfalls and designated in the general fund, or whether or not you consider that as being an increase in designated or not, that's not the important part. The important part is that the 911 authority is making a payment that is going against debt service for the cost of the public safety building. The other important takeaway from this slide is the fact that there is no tax increase in this proposed budget. Here's more of the detailed numbers between the fiscal year approved and the FY15 proposed and total expenditures. As you will see, the 1.4 million, as Craig mentioned, is continued again in the fiscal year 15 budget. You'll recognize these slides from before, and actually they've not changed very much. The percentages remain the same. Over the years, the designated dollars have reduced as the other dollars have increased, and the largest portion of your local money comes from real estate. When you look at undesignated revenue, $97.1 million, 65% of that is real estate. If you add that to personal property, you have about 77% of your local monies that come from property taxes alone. Where does the money go? 60% goes to all school funds. If you add the portion of this budget that goes towards school facilities, it's 71% of the total pie. The general fund is 26%, and that fourth covers $43.8 million, or all of these different functions within the general fund. Of those, public safety and health and welfare consume over half. All school funds, and this does not include debt service, as you see, the majority of those funds go for operations. As Craig also mentioned, the local dollars or county funding for schools is level funded, $42.08 million. This does not include debt service or school capital. Tax rate history. The real estate tax rate has been raised 4 times in the last 5 years. This is a chart to show you. Again, it's the majority of it had to do with the 9-cent increase to pay for new school facilities. 3 cents of that was used for operations, and last year 2 cents was earmarked for school capital projects. The overview, we had increases in the base budget related to fringe benefits, VRS increases, group life increases, workers' compensation increases. County departments requested $3.6 million. School operating, school cafeteria fund, and all total $11.7 million. There is $4 million available. 63% of that earmarked for schools. There's a shortfall of $7.7 million to be able to fully fund all of the requests that were made in this budget. Required expenditures, and the first one you see at the top is the cost for the Western Virginia Regional Jail. We've had a work session on that, so you're familiar with the increase in inmates and where that number comes from. Again, there is increases in fringe benefits. Craig mentioned the county's share of the 911 authority, $325,361, which is net of the funds that have been transferred for the sheriff's office for dispatcher positions. Fire and rescue insurance and VRS increases, $91,000. Health insurance for part-time employees, we are carrying $27,000 in special contingencies to cover the cost of health insurance. There's debate that's been going back and forth about whether or not that deadline would be extended. It does not appear it's going to at this time, and therefore we're carrying a portion of that year's funding for health insurance for those part-time employees. Public safety building, the increase estimated for utility costs, $68,000. You're currently leasing space for the magistrate's office. The reassessment project is in there as well at the current time. I anticipate them leaving about this time next year. They will probably be gone, but there's still the need to have space for the magistrate's office. That's almost $91,000. The health department local match, we are required under the cooperative health budget to match state dollars for the local health department. So for every 38 cents we put in, we get $1. They match off the 62%. These dollars are contingent upon the fact that the state will continue to provide their matching share. Other requests, there were other outside, we call them outside agencies, outside of county government, that some we consider mandated. There were many, many requests. Those that we consider mandated have been funded here within this proposed budget. The dollars to offset that increase, it comes from the reduction in the funds necessary for the juvenile detention home. The 3-year rolling average of kids in the detention home is to our favor this year, and because of that, there was about a $23,000 savings, and a portion of those dollars is what is offsetting the mandated increase in the other agencies. $54,095 is added to the sheriff's office. That's to provide 2 deputy positions and to reclassify a 3rd position partially funded by the comp board. That's to restore 3 out of the 9 that have been transferred to the 911 authority. The sheriff has asked for those to become sworn deputy positions. This represents 6 months of those costs. The required expenditures on the other page, along with the sheriff's office increase here, a total of $1.9 million. 75% of that $1.9 million in expenditures supports public safety, and that in fact includes the increases for public safety employees in VRS, group life, and workers' comp. Here's the summary for the general fund. The proposed spending, 1.9. The revenue available from all sources, designated and undesignated, 1.5. And therefore, in order to cover these items, Craig mentioned this as well, $400,000 has been absorbed within the base. School funding, 2.5, and that's your state funding with the slight increase in the cafeteria fund. There are no additional county dollars in this budget for the schools. There are some housekeeping adjustments here, and I bring them up because if you're looking to compare some charts from one to the other, they may look a little odd with the history not matching up with what's been proposed, and that has to do with the reclassification of some revenue categories. There is no dollar impact from these changes. It just moves them from one category of designated to another category of undesignated. The first one is the 911 tax, and I guess many of you will remember it used to be remitted locally. There was a local tax. The Board of Supervisors determined what that rate was. Those monies were remitted back to the county here locally, and you were required to show those dollars as offsetting the cost of dispatching. Well, that went away. The state took it over. We don't do that anymore, and so therefore the need to be able to show that separately is not there. It also comes as a part of the telecommunications tax, and so you don't really have a distinction between those two anymore. We chose this year as the year to try and correct that in the budget document as we move forward. The consumer utility tax, a portion of that tax many, many years ago was earmarked to go against solid waste collection. And the reason being is that the board at that time thought as they built out the consolidated sites, they would only be used by citizens of the county, the unincorporated area of the county, not in the two towns. So they wanted a revenue source that was only collected in the unincorporated area to pay that portion of it. Well, over the years, what's transpired is all citizens use the consolidated sites, and so there's not a need any longer to show a separation or designation of consumer utility tax against solid waste collection. Again, we're moving it from one place to another place. It has absolutely no dollar impact. Some expenditure adjustments. There is one, the Division of General Services, which has been under tab 400 in your budget book, is now broken into two separate divisions. General Services will continue as 400, and Engineering and Regulatory Compliance is the second division that's being separated out. That's under tab 440. This is an effort to address the upcoming stormwater issues and regulations. The Division of Engineering and Regulatory Compliance will incorporate stormwater management along with engineering, building inspections, E&S, landfill regulatory compliance in an effort to try and put one focus on all these like programs. Dollars for the new division are transferred from the General Services Division, and at this time, there are no new dollars added. We all know that in the future, we'll need to be looking at a fee structure and some things to pay for the stormwater program, but those are not incorporated in this budget. And with that said, I will turn it over to Craig for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Carol. As I shared with Angie and Mark and Carol as we were going through this process, not only is this my fifth budget that I've presented to this board in Montgomery County, I've been in local government for 25 years now, either as a finance director or an assistant manager or as a city manager or county administrator. And I can honestly tell you that this process never gets any easier. As a matter of fact, this budget is probably one of the most difficult that I've ever had to recommend. Funding for mandated services consumed all the new revenues we had available for county priorities this year. To fully fund the budget request from the schools, a real estate tax increase of 7.4 cents would have been required, taking the real estate tax rate to 96.4 cents and not providing any additional funding for other county initiatives. I know I've got some friends here this evening from the schools. I hope they'll still be friends after this presentation. And I know I've shifted a lot of work back over to them, but to look at recommending a tax rate of 96 cents plus is just, I couldn't do it this year. Knowing that we have significant issues ahead with regard to school capital facilities in the Christiansburg Strand. And here's one of the things that concerns me greatly. With the development of a stormwater management program that we know will require user fees or tax revenues or some combination of both to implement in the next fiscal year, I simply could not present a budget to you this year that would require another round of tax rate increases. Again, I want to thank Carol, Angie, and Mark for the work that they've done. As Carol mentioned earlier, we've had some spirited debate about these numbers this year. We've challenged the numbers. To staff's credit, as we mentioned earlier, we've been able to absorb $400,000 of increases into the base budget. That means funding for other things that we've had in the past has gone down because we've absorbed that into the base budget, simply to try to get this budget balanced. I also want to thank Ruth Ritchie and Susan Dickerson in the finance department. They've done a tremendous amount of work to get us to this point. This evening I laid a calendar at each of your places, which has March and April. As you can see, over the next 2 months, we've got 9 meetings scheduled, counting tonight's meeting, to talk about the budget. We have our regular board meeting next Monday the 10th and another regular meeting on the 24th. We also have a budget work session scheduled for 6 p.m. on March 17th. Hopefully that will be the night that the board is able to determine an advertised tax rate and advertised budget. And I do want to remind you that you can advertise the rate as I've proposed. You can advertise a rate higher than I've proposed. You can advertise a rate lower than I've proposed. That's the board's decision. We also have our first community meeting on March 25th, which I believe is a Tuesday night at Christiansburg High School. Then in April, we have a public hearing scheduled here on April the 3rd. I believe that's a Thursday night for the public hearing on the tax rate and budget. We have a community meeting scheduled Tuesday, April 8th at Margaret Beeks Elementary School. That's also begins at 7 o'clock. Then we have our regular meetings. April 14th is the regular board meeting, and we hope to be able to adopt the budget at that meeting. If there's still a need for discussion, we can have it on the 28th of April as well. But I believe all the information has been loaded into Dropbox, so you've got the opportunity to review it electronically. Also, we've provided the budget books for you, and I look forward to working with you as we go through this process. It's never easy. There's always going to be challenges and concerns, but one thing I've always appreciated about this board is you can disagree without being disagreeable with each other when you walk out of the room, and I know we'll have plenty of spirited discussion again this year. But Mr. Chair, that's the budget message. Thank you very much.
One question.
Yes, sir.
We have a calendar of meetings, and is it a way that these meeting dates can be posted on our county public access channel? What I'm saying is so the public can, I mean, it's kind of long, but
Like a graphic that comes
yeah, like a graphic that come up on our public access channel, because I think the citizens need to be able to see when especially the special meetings are scheduled. So if they want to come out and speak to the board, that they can do so, and especially the 2 community meetings that we're having, because I think if we load it some way that it would help get the word out.
Be glad to do that.
Related to that, could we get an electronic copy of the calendar?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have it to you before the night's over.
Oh, you
I
go ahead.
have a couple of questions.
Okay.
If that's right. Obviously, a lot of reading. 2 things is, what's the current crime rate in Montgomery County?
I could not answer that question,
Okay.
but I can get it for you.
Pardon? Yeah.
I'll
Could
be
we
glad to get it for
we get a historical, maybe just over the past 5-10 years, something like
Sure.
that, about the crime rate? You could be broken down. It doesn't have to be broken down. It's just because I'm noticing, most of the expenditures, as Carol said, is related to public safety, including the request for new deputies. So, we should know something about the crime rate. Also, and maybe this is more of a question for the board, but if we were to do something about the park and ride situation, there's no money here, in the budget. So where might that money come from?
The county has money set aside in capital reserves for future capital needs, for facilities, for schools and whatnot. If the board deems that that's a priority that they want to address, you could turn to those capital reserve funds if you wanted to allocate some for that.
And those are one-time funds. Are there any existing ongoing expenses related to the park and ride?
No, sir. Not,
No, there are not.
No,
Okay.
because again, the park and ride is not a county function. It's actually a state function. It's managed and maintained by VDOT. The county really does not have a direct role in that at all, but there has been discussion among the board about trying to assist VDOT in addressing that issue, and the way that's been discussed is perhaps using taxpayer dollars to purchase land to address the need for space.
Okay, so potentially pulling money out of our reserve fund too?
Yes, sir. That's the only place we'd have it to pull
That's the
from.
only place, because there's nothing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Oh, Mr. Tuck.
And it may be in this, a breakdown of the absorbing with base dollars, the $0.4 million. Is that in here, or is that something that we could ask the staff to help us understand where that $400,000 is coming from? Is that...
We can
Okay.
get that. I
Thank you very
didn't
much.
think I'd seen that either, but we can show you where lines were reduced to cover that.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Biggs?
I just had a question. Okay, well, of course, we don't really know until the General Assembly's finished, and I don't know when they're going to finish since they've got to argue about Medicaid, but, so we're not expecting any new monies from the state for any county programs at all, okay? The schools are getting some money from the state
About
that,
$2.5 million.
according to the governor's budget, okay? So any new revenue that we took in went strictly over to the county side to pay for the increase in services that are mandated, like that million,
Any growth in
the
county?
growth
Yes.
money.
Yes.
So it wasn't shared with schools.
That's
It would just
correct.
strictly went over to the county side, and even with that, we still didn't have enough money to pay for what we need to pay for.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay.
Other? Well,
Thank you guys very much.
Mr. Meadows, thank you and the staff for your presentation, your very informative presentation this evening, and I'm sure throughout the coming weeks that we will have many and many more questions to ask once we review the document. And thank you guys, you're sort of the hardworking people, you know. Any other questions before we go out of work session? Need a motion to go out?
Motion.
Have a motion and a second. Would the temporary clerk again call the roll?
Supervisor Gabriel?
Aye.
Supervisor Tuck?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Creed? Aye. Chair Brown?
Aye.
6 ayes.
I'll tell Vicki you've done a good job.
I got the names right anyway.
And so now we are adjourned.